I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, it's TGU time, the governance update from VLGA Connect, with thanks to our sponsors Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Time to have a look at some of the stories making news around the world of local government this week, and to help us with that, Julie Reid joins us. Hello, Julie.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Tony. Nice to see you again.
How's your week been?
Oh, very good. Very good, Chris. I've had a road trip up to Latrobe this week, which has been fantastic. Nice team up there, and a big shout out to them.
And Tony Rownick, of course, from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers joins us. Hello, Tony. You've been here, there and everywhere.
I have, Chris, and great to join you and Julie again. Of course, you and I spent some time together, Chris, last Friday at the VLGA Fast Track event at Melbourne Town Hall, and congrats on doing an amazing job, emceeing some fabulous conversations, really insightful, I thought. I was lucky to join a panel discussion with Trent Sullivan, Councillor Trent Sullivan, the Mayor of Greater Geelong, and Councillor Mia Shaw, the Mayor of Wyndham. And didn't they have some interesting things to say about leading under pressure? It was a great conversation.
They sure did. Mia's not the current mayor, by the way, former mayor, but yes, certainly brought some relevant experience to that discussion. And the other panel was terrific as well. Lots of insights, from what I understand, gained by those who were present. We had Sally Capp adorned in Collingwood paraphernalia. We'll just let that one go through.
You would be happy this morning, Chris. They've gone zip out of 3. Jack Higgins, I think, was in the second row of the seating when he kicked that last goal. But anyway, it's not important.
So what you're telling me is Sally would have been much happier last week than she would be today. That was great to have her provide her insights into how she deals with pressured decision-making processes. We had Kos Samaras as a keynote speaker. That was fascinating about political trends and where things are going, particularly in relation to the major parties and their influence. And another terrific keynote speaker with Sam from the Swinburne Business School. So for those who weren't there, you missed a terrific day, Fast Track 2024 last week. And Tony, not satisfied with one conference appearance inside a week, you've also done conference duty this week for LG Pro on the hot topic of AI.
Go anywhere, speak anywhere, Chris and Julie. The LG Pro Social Media Conference, which was another really well-attended event in the Melbourne CBD yesterday, and I got to join. Was a co-speaker at a session chaired by Travis Fitzgibbon of Beloke Shire Council, who also did a great job there. But the other speaker was Ross Monaghan from Deakin University, and we talked about AI, artificial intelligence, and the risk mitigation factors that councils should be aware of. And interestingly, what came out of that too is that of the 79 municipalities across the state, currently only one council, Warrnambool Council, has an AI policy. And I've encouraged, any CEOs, governance managers, etc., watching now to really contemplate the need to have an AI policy. You might not be using AI yourself, but I guarantee there'll be some members of your staff at your council that will be punching things into ChatGPT. And there are some risks there. There's certainly some values and efficiencies we'll gain for the sector from this generative AI technology. But things like privacy, inadvertent disclosure of confidential information, the bias and fairness issue around AI inferring personal data about people, inferring that from this information, you must be of this gender, you must be of this age, for example, that can be an issue. And of course, we know that ChatGPT itself isn't 100% accurate, Chris and Julie. It does hallucinate some of the data. So we need to be careful checking verifying, if you like, the content that comes out. So I think starting point for councils is to perhaps have a look at the Warrnambool AI policy and look at having your own internal policy. Because, as I say, it's being used by someone in your organisation, and it would be good to give some guidance in terms of appropriate use.
Wise words, Tony. And it's not just ChatGPT. Of course, Google's got its own version, Microsoft Copilot.
Copilot.
Perplexity is another one that I've been playing with, which looks to be fabulous, and more in the works. Elon Musk and Twitter, I think they've got a thing called Grok going on in the background, which has just become open source. So there's a lot of tools that sit over these things that people might be playing with, not realizing what's in behind it. And as you say, those risks, Tony, they're not necessarily immediately apparent, are they?
Correct. And we we receive a lot of personal information at councils, people's addresses, their details of property they own, other personal information, and we actually have some legal obligations in how we deal with that. And we wouldn't want to be loading into one of these open generative AI platforms personal information that about a person, because it goes into the platform and it's part of its learning algorithm, if you like, and is potentially out there in the public domain, and it could be, imagine someone feeding some. Please summarise, the tender document. The tender submission, or please, here are 4 tender submissions. Can you please rank them in terms of what they say about, the environment or something? That information can go into the public domain inadvertently, and that could be problematic. But also see really some great applications in the future for generative AI for councils. Councils use so much data, and these platforms allow us to, very quickly wade through that data, summarise, identify particular elements of it, etc. So it will be a useful tool as well.
Have you played with any AI tools yet, Julie, in your work?
I have a little bit, but I'm not overly confident with the accuracy that's coming out. So, and I know that we did a little bit of a check ourselves, didn't we, on VLGA Connect on the TGU that we held, and we found that it was very inaccurate in some of the things that it came up with. So stepping into that with caution. But it's interesting because I'm travelling around the state and I'm doing lots of training for staff, and a lot of the new staff to local government and the more junior staff are asking those questions about, what's the position on AI? So I'm getting quite a few queries across that. People that have come from the private sector who might have embraced that a little bit more, and have themselves set up, and now saying, is it okay for me to use that in local government? So just something for all senior officers in local government just to be aware of. There's lots of junior and new people to local government that are asking the question, can I use it? How can I use it? Etc. So I think there is a growing demand for a response.
Good point. As Tony said, we're only aware of Warrnambool so far that has a policy. It'd be great to hear from any councils that are perhaps in the process of developing their policies. We can get a bit of a pulse check on where people are at with that. And even overseas, we've got a growing overseas audience for this program, particularly who listen to the podcast. So it would be interesting to know what's happening in local governments in other parts of the world as well. So reach out and let us know. Good topic, Tony. Thanks for raising that. Now, a couple of government announcements of interest this week. I'm sure you've both got some views on these. Firstly, a long-awaited, can we call it a response to Operation Sandon? My first look at this didn't really tell me much new. Am I misreading or missing something here, Tony, firstly?
I think you're right, Chris. I think it was a response because we better get something out there after 9 months post the Operation Sandon IBAC report, released in, I think, about July last year. the state government through the Minister for Local Government has provide a response in relation to the 31, I think, odd recommendations of IBAC. I thought I was a bit disappointed in that a lot of the responses are, where essentially we will consider this. And so what that means, of course, is the uncertainty continues for the sector. The hope, I think, for many of us was that prior to the October 2024 general election cycle, we'd have some more detail on, will there be significant changes to statutory planning decisions? What we've learnt from the announcement yesterday or the day before, I think perhaps, is that that'll be considered as part of a review of the Planning and Environment Act to take place in the future. And similarly with many of the other elements recommended by IBAC, the model governance rules, for example. The state government's response to that was, well, remember, it's a principle-based act, the Local Government Act 2020, suggesting maybe that there could be some variation between councils on governance rules, but then in the same, context, then said, we'll consider this. This recommendation and potentially adopt it. We support it in principle. So a little vague and unclear. There will be an interdepartmental task force set up, Chris and Julie, which was certainly one of the recommendations, and I think that will be set up quite shortly and report back to government within 18 months.
Julie, any thoughts on this response? A bit of a holding response still?
Yeah, I feel that it is holding, and I'm a little bit disappointed to hear that they're going to wait for the reform to the Planning Environment Act before addressing some of these issues. However, at least there's a commitment now to update an old Planning and Environment Act, so that seems to be going ahead. So that's a good thing. I think that obviously 18 months is still a long time to wait for the interdepartmental task force to come up with what needs to be done. They've already had 9 months. What's been happening? That seems like a long time.
It's not giving us a sense that there's any urgency there, is it?
No, which really kind of worries me. But anyway, I would have thought that we would have been a bit more progressed by this stage. Anyway, maybe they're doing a whole lot of work in the background. I don't know, but I would have thought that 18 months is just a little bit too far away, considering the severity of what was raised in that report. I would have thought that it would have been dealt with as a priority. So,
and given it's an election year, and you might have expected some of that stuff to be dealt with quite definitively before the next group of councillors comes into office.
Maybe.
I think perhaps that reading between the lines, I think we'll probably get the mandatory training regime in terms of annual midterm refresher training. I think it was being described. I think we'll probably get some of that prior to the election. I think we might even get a councillor code of conduct, uniform councillor code of conduct. Unfortunately, I think some of the language in the announcement is a bit contradictory, and I think that wasn't meant to be so. I think that there's just some cut and paste errors in there that makes it hard to navigate. But I do think we'll see some announcements around the mandatory training regime and the uniform code of conduct.
All right.
The other thing, Chris, is that I mentioned the electoral review expert panel and its review of the government's reforms to the Electoral Act 2002. And they said they considered IBAC's recommendation to prohibit donations from high-risk groups such as property developers. And they're saying that they've now received the report, but they're not sort of saying really in there what's going to happen or what the timing is of that. So is that part of the interdepartmental task group that they're going to be dealing with that in 18 months? I think that's just a little bit unclear. Anyway.
I think that in relation to donation reform, firstly, IBAC's recommendation wasn't confined to local government because it was dealt with state government, parliamentarians as well.
That's right.
And I get the strong sense that the government doesn't want to change those measures in relation to state parliamentarians. And so we're not seeing much definitive in relation to donation reform.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a sleeper there, Chris.
Okay, we'll stay tuned and see what comes of all of that. Another announcement of interest, particularly around the fringe of Melbourne, is some new controls on green wedge management. I'm sure your planner eye went to this pretty quickly, Julie. What were your thoughts?
It did, Chris. It did. I was like, what's going on here? I know that there are green wedge areas within Metro Melbourne that have not been protected recently. And so this is interesting that now they've unveiled again another plan for this green wedge protection. So Sonia Kilkenny, the Minister for Planning, actually released the Green Wedge and Agricultural Land Action Plan this week, outlining a focus on preserving green wedges and agricultural land on the outskirts. And so that's really sending the message to say that the focus of development is going to be inside the metro area, and it's going to be in areas where there's already development, and there's going to be more development within the metro area and less focused on the edge of Melbourne. So now that's a very strong planning principle that we've heard about for a long, long period of time, and so it's consistent with that principle. I was interested to see that they're talking about Melbourne's population reaching the size of London by 2050. This is significant growth, Chris, and I did focus in on that because I know how big London is.
I did too, Julie.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming the size of London now, which is just on 9 million, but by 2050, I'm assuming London will have continued to grow.
Yeah,
so they're not suggesting we're going to catch London.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're saying they've got this ambitious target of building 800,000 new homes over the next decade, with 70% of those being built in established suburbs. And this is part of their housing plan. So they've identified those key areas in which, there's going to be higher density living in those key areas to try and pick up the housing stock that they need to be able to address this housing shortage. So, look, they're going to they're saying that the planning reforms will also be introduced to provide better permanent protection for green wedge areas against overdevelopment and inappropriate use, because they want to protect the agricultural land. And so again, very key planning principle, consistent with what we've heard before. So, but anyway, another new announcement. Will be interesting to see what their reaction is.
Yeah, there is a lot about that, right to farm and protecting prime agricultural land on the fringes. So we'll see new planning scheme overlay in Werribee and Bacchus Marsh, where they've got particularly, fertile agricultural land there. We'll see the agricultural planning policy updated for that, for that area within 100 k's of the CBD, a new planning practice note around that, so that if you're a permit applicant in a rural conservation zone, a green wedge zone, and you're wanting to have a discretionary use, hospitality or something that's not to do with agriculture, then you'll be responsible in your application for explaining, how your discretionary use will not impact upon, lawful agricultural operations in the area. And there's mandatory sort of site coverage, setbacks, building heights for these discretionary uses. And they're going to prohibit things like data centres in green wedge zones and rural conservation zones, and new conditions for these discretionary uses like exhibition centres and group accommodation and that. So no change to the urban growth boundary either. So the UGB It goes, it's that ring, concentric sort of ring around Melbourne. No change to that. So 12 green wedges, as you say, Julie. So there's a lot of that peri-urban part of Melbourne, or the fringes of Melbourne. Originally came from out of Nillumbik, of course, the Green Wedge Council. There's a lot of large tracts of land in Melbourne that are within this green wedge zone, and it attracted, I think, nearly 900 public submissions. So it's been a significant document.
It's very controversial because there's a lot of people that are sitting on that land on the edge of Melbourne that are rubbing their hands going, you beauty, it's coming towards us. And as soon as the announcement gets made about the lockdown, then, it creates that tension, and with that amount of submissions, I'm not surprised. But there's got to be from a planning perspective, there's got to be a containment of this growth. Melbourne is expanding, as we know, too far out, and is impacting on that land, and we don't have the densities within Melbourne across the board that would be anywhere near what is in London, for example. So I think that's why they've probably dropped that one in. It doesn't mean high, really, really high buildings in all circumstances, but this is where it becomes controversial when you're talking about going up in terms of the height of buildings.
Hopefully it means red double-decker buses in Melbourne.
Look, my eye went to that as well. It is pretty extraordinary to think that Melbourne could be the size, even approximately the size of London, as one of the great major metropolises of the world on a global scale. But I did go down the rabbit hole, and it depends on who you ask and where you look. Melbourne's population generally forecast to be 8 million or more by 2050. London apparently currently is 8.9 million. Forecast to be 9.8 by 2043. I couldn't find a 2050 figure, but you would expect it's going to be pretty close to 10 million by 2050. Just on that issue of going up to accommodate more people, etc., I think it was Willoughby Council in Sydney last week released some modelling based on the New South Wales government's proposed new rules about more density near transport hubs, etc., and came up with an extraordinary number of residences that would be fit into those areas, and the more height that would be required to deliver that, which I think is good so that people start to understand exactly what's being talked about here, so they can visualise.
Yeah, and there will be some of that, but I think there's also some really smart architects out there that are coming up with designs that look at lower scale, but still, providing and really respecting the development, the existing development around them. I think that design in a lot of these cases becomes really critical to ensure that you can create an environment like London where you can see high densities, but it doesn't mean that every corner of every street has a 20, 50-story building. It's lower scale, but it's all designed more appropriately, I suppose.
I should just say we've gotten off green wedge and onto high rise and density. And before anyone misinterprets what was said, potentially, we're not talking about high rise on green wedge. Okay,
no, we're not.
Really, really clear about that. We're moving on. Let's talk about heritage protection. I know this one caught your eye, Tony, the historic rail yard workshops in Newport, which I've had the opportunity to have a look at a number of times. There's a push on from Hobsons Bay Council to have them heritage listed.
Yeah, I did see this article, Chris and Julie, and Councillor Peter Hempel was in the article part of a push to get these 134-year-old Newport Railway workshops on the UNESCO World Heritage Register. So there were 20 sites in Australia on the World Heritage Register, only 2 in Victoria. It struck me, only 2. And that's Budgem Bim, which also known as Mount Eccles, sort of on the road between Port Fairy and Hamilton, an old volcano in the Shire of Moyne. And the second one is the Royal Exhibition Building Precinct in Carlton, where or I took my mum the other day for the International Garden Show. So yeah, push to get another site on the World Heritage Register. This is a nearly 50-hectare site next to Science Works. Newport, people might know it. And apparently one of the world's most significant railway heritage sites, unique heritage buildings. There's rolling stock still there. There's the manufacturing equipment. And apparently you need a nomination by your national government. So the federal government would need to get behind this. And congrats to Hobson's Bay City Council, I think, for identifying some part of their area which might be of world significance.
Story in the Age on that this week, and we'll pop the link in the show notes if you'd like to know more. Kerryn Ellis, a fan of the program and was on the program during my absence. Steve had a chat about the work they're doing down there to recover from recent storm events. Kerryn has been reappointed as the CEO of Sth Gippsland Shire for a new 5-year term, with some really nice words from the Mayor about the way Kerryn has led that organisation through the return to elected representation a couple of years ago.
Yeah, very pleased for Kerryn, and certainly she's worked really, really hard since she's been down there doing a champion job, and so it's great to see her reappointed. I had no doubt about that, but yeah, it's good news. Good news in the sector.
Absolutely. Well done, Kerryn. A new councillor at Greater Dandenong once the counting was done in the by-election there. Now, this was triggered by the resignation of Eden Foster, who was elected to State Parliament, of course, the former mayor there at Greater Dandenong. Philip Dan is the new council representative, one of 13 candidates to contest that by-election. And if not already sworn in, I assume that would be happening pretty soon.
Yeah, congrats to Councillor Philip Dan for Yarraman Ward.
Yes, indeed. Now, there's a new inquiry just been announced, folks, into the sustainability of local government in a financial sense, and it's going to look at a few more broader issues than that as well. This is it's the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Regional Development, Infrastructure and Transport, which will examine local government sustainability. And this has been roundly welcomed by ALGA, by LGAQ and others. This will be interesting, Julie and Tony, to see how it transpires.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Chris, because the chair of the committee has been allocated to Mr. Luke Gosling, who's an MP, and he said that the committee has prioritised a deeper understanding of local government financial sustainability and funding frameworks alongside the changing infrastructure requirements and service delivery obligations for local government. So he's already come out, made that statement, which is really good. I believe the committee are seeking submissions, Chris and Tony, and that's going to close
3rd of May.
Yeah, 3rd of May for organisations and individuals. So I think this is worthy of a look, as some of the associations have already. I think it's worthy of a look for groups of councils, particularly regional councils in this space that are really experiencing some of these challenges in infrastructure. Yeah, they are recognising significant public infrastructure shortages and shortages in workforce as well in this space. So that's also something that has been a hot topic for some time in local government in Victoria.
And LGAQ has said they'd like to see it deal with the issue of cost shifting from other levels of government onto local government. Tony, I don't know whether you've seen what's happened with parliamentary inquiries of this type in the past, but can we expect them to have some sort of meaningful impact, do you think?
It's yet another. There has been a lot of them, but I think we should be receptive. We've been calling for this and get behind it. But as you say, there's a lot of paper sitting in libraries from inquiries. These are very broad terms of reference, as Julie says, though, beyond financial sustainability, dealing with infrastructure, dealing with issues around attracting and retaining a skilled workforce, etc. So I think, across the sector, the representative organisations will be looking to participate in this and looking to see what momentum, if any, it creates, yeah, at a governmental level, at a high political level, to provide better support, ongoing support for what the services local government deliver.
We'll pop a link to that announcement and the details of the inquiry in the show notes if you'd like to know more. But as Julie and Tony have said, 3rd of May is the closing date for submissions there. I imagine one of the groups that might want to make a submission is Regional Cities Victoria, which has this week called for more funding to go from Commonwealth funding outside of Melbourne into Victoria, where one in every 4 people reside. This would probably be echoed by regional advocacy groups around the country, I would think, Tony and Julie.
Yeah. As you say, picking up on that 1 in 4 or 25%, Regional Cities Victoria have said, well, they want the Commonwealth to guarantee that 25% of the funding, infrastructure funding that's allocated to Victoria should go to projects and initiatives outside Melbourne to reflect that demographic that you've just described, Chris. The chair of Regional Cities Victoria is the Greater Shepparton Mayor, Shane Sarley, and he, in a press release I saw, said, that RCV was gutted when funding was removed for a series of projects across regional Victoria, like Geelong Fast Rail, the Shepparton bypass stage 1, and Hume Freeway intersection upgrade at Wodonga. And so, again, strong advocates, Regional Cities Victoria, and I can imagine they'll be participating in this House of Representatives Standing Committee submission process as well.
So, Chris, that's the 10 largest regional councils across Victoria. So Ballarat, Bendigo, Geelong, Horsham, Latrobe, Mildura, Shepparton, Wangaratta, Warrnambool and Wodonga. So, and, interestingly, that collectively between those 10 councils, they're home to more than 800,000 people. So, it's pretty significant. It's great that they're working together through RCV.
Great that they're on the front foot there. I suspect they didn't know this inquiry was about to be announced, but the timing couldn't have been better to raise that issue about infrastructure funding, etc., right when that inquiry got announced. So all power to them. We love a good policy here at the Governance Update. We were talking earlier about Warrnambool leading the way with AI policy. I haven't heard too many fair access policies, but there is one that's out for consultation now from Bass Coast Shire. This is all about equitable use of local sporting facilities, etc. Tony.
That's right, Chris. That's right. So I saw the Mayor Claire Leserve at Bass Coast getting behind this announcement. It's calling for equal representation of women within community sports clubs at a leadership and governance level in those organisations, for the same prize money for competitions on council land, regardless of whether it's the male competition or the female competition. So yeah, it's a good initiative. I think it'll attract a fair bit of attention, and I think it's a draft policy, so presumably it's out there for community comment, but really well worth a look, I think, and I think a lot of councils would be considering issues like this when it comes to the use of publicly managed, council managed facilities like sporting grounds, making sure that that the use of those facilities reflects this notion of fair access for all, regardless of gender.
Indeed. And last night, as we record this, we had a Gender Equity in Local Government global panel for VLGA and LGIU with some UK and Australian examples of work that councils and other organisations are doing to lift that gender equality issue, not just at the elected level, but within council organisations. And Julie, here's an example of how councils can influence that gender equity issue out in their communities.
Absolutely, Chris. And look, I think there's actually quite a lot of this sort of work happening across local government. We're just not hearing too much about it. But I do know that the likes of, say, Marybeck have done quite a bit of work in this gender equality space in sport, so I am coming across it in different councils that I work with. I definitely think there's a lot of good stuff happening in this space. And remembering we've got a general principle under the Local Government Act, haven't we, Tony, that sort of talks about and encourages council, obviously, to make sure that services that are provided, the service performance does factor in equality. There should be equitable access across all of its services to the community. So there is an obligation there for councils now, and I think that they are stepping up. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. Yep.
Excellent. All right, moving on. I want to note this terrific story out of Sydney where two parking officers at Canterbury Bankstown Council, and there's a photo somewhere around which I'll try and find for this. They've been praised for their quick thinking when they found a 76-year-old man semi-conscious and motionless in the bushes. It turned out that the man was having a stroke, and these parking officers moved very quickly to call for help. They performed a stroke assessment, which clearly they've had some training to do, and waited with him until the paramedics arrived. And by all accounts, they pretty much saved this man's life with their quick thinking. Just a reminder that, council workers like parking officers, for example, they're on the front line in more ways than one.
Yeah, and this is amazing. These are great news stories, Chris, and it was good that it actually hit the media. This is Carleen and Fred. So a big shout out to Carleen and Fred from Canterbury Bankstown, who are heroes now in the community, who have saved this gentleman's life. And the mayor there has recognised them for their great treatment of Mr. Patton, who suffered at that time. So look, great news story. We want to hear more of those. So if people do have great news stories to share, then send them through to us, because we're happy to talk about them.
The Inner West Council demerger, which has been on the cards for a while, will not proceed. The government has received a recommendation from the Boundaries Commission that it does not go any further, mainly due to the extreme cost to the community of carrying out that uncoupling. Cootamundra Gundagai, however, is proceeding down the path as far as they can, at least, with some business plans and financial plans to be considered this week for adoption. They'll go off to the Boundaries Commission if adopted by the council, which I think was to occur earlier this week. And we'll see whether the argument is any different for that one.
Yeah, I did see that announcement by the New South Wales Local Government Minister, Chris Julie, and accepted the Boundary Commission's view that in relation to Inner West Council, at least, the financial disadvantages of a demerger would, outweigh any advantage.
Yes, very problematic, isn't it? There's a few of those merged councils in New South Wales that have talked about demerging, but it's obviously much harder, or what I'm trying to say, much easier said than actually done. And a couple of stories out of the UK, Julie. I know you always like this, but this 4-day week situation in South Cambridgeshire, we've been keeping an eye on. There's a real standoff emerging here between the council and the local government minister, Simon Hoare. They are now talking about introducing laws to stop councils from having a 4-day week. The council is continuing with its trial despite the comments from the minister, and the minister has described that decision as disappointing and arrogant. So a real rock and a hard place here between the central government and the council wanting to exercise its autonomy in terms of how it manages its staff.
Yeah, and this doesn't ring true or right to me, Chris. This is the central government trying to control how to manage staff. This is the responsibility of local government. And this is, I was so pleased to see these trials happening. And I just think this is, to me, very disappointing that the central government is stepping in and saying, no, sorry, we're going to control how you manage your staff. What else is going to be next? So I just think this is wrong from all levels. and that the central government should leave local government just to operate local government. You know, the council did claim that the system did improve performance and staff recruitment. And obviously they were the first ones that did the trial, but I think that it was proven that there were benefits for the council as a result of it. So just to take this one approach and stop everybody from doing the same thing, I think is just wrong. Leave local government to deliver its services and to manage its staff is the message.
Of course, the problem is local government is in a parlous state in the UK at the moment financially, and they're looking to the government for support, financial support. We had this conversation with Jonathan Carr-West, the CEO of LGIU, on VLGA Connect a few weeks ago. The government is starting to make some additional funding and measures available, and of course that gives them the opportunity to put some terms and conditions on that, Tony, which I'm assuming the government has the power to do, and this is one of the things that they're looking to put some more controls around.
Well, yeah, that's right. I, you know, as an employer, you know, the national government do, you know, often, you know, regulate employment conditions and awards and that sort of stuff, I guess. I think that there's a mixed view out there. You know, the Local Government Association there has done a peer review of it, and they've got a you know, perhaps not as a supportive view on the outcomes of the trial. So one of the issues was how do you fit time for, you know, staff training and that within a 4-day period, and you know, people potentially feeling drained. So I think the jury's out, but we seem to be perhaps in local government, perhaps you know, in Australia, we seem to be perhaps a little behind these initiatives that are occurring in other parts of the world at the moment. And as I say, jury's out as to whether it will be sort of a sustained position or not. What struck me was they said that staff were given 100% of the pay to do 80% of the hours, which means there must have been substantial change in productivity, assuming they had the same output. So, and I can understand how that might work. Staff are incentivized, you know, you get a day off, we'll work a bit harder on the other days. But, you know, it begs the question about productivity before, I suppose. But, yeah, it's hotly contested in the UK at the moment, as you say.
Yeah. And also in the UK, they're dealing with, as people in Canada are, the US and here in Australia, security concerns at council meetings, as some of these meetings, particularly where Gaza-related motions have been put forward, have gotten very contentious. The Local Government Association in the UK has welcomed a commitment from the central government for money to improve security provisions for local representatives. So £31 million for councillors, including giving them a named police contact, increased private security for those at higher risk, and some expanded cybersecurity advice. I'm not sure if this was a hot topic when you were over there in the UK, Julie, but it's good to hear it being recognised that some additional support's needed here.
Yeah, it was interesting, Chris, because it didn't really come up, the people that I spoke to, but I think they were probably more focused internally about what was going on, the pressures, you know, the financial sustainability pressures, etc. So that didn't come up, but, you know, it's really, really clear that the government have heard that there's disturbing stories out there about councillors being harassed and intimidated in doing their roles, which is really sad to hear. And we know that, you know, that happens across the world. So, look, good on them for putting forward some money to be able to help with this situation. What it will mean in practice on the ground, you've mentioned what they've said that they might be able to do, how much it's going to help them.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what feedback the Local Government Association get from councillors about whether or not it's really shifted their feeling of safety, but also shifted their level of protection.
Yeah.
So it comes as some parts of England are going to council elections in May. And Tony, interested in your take on this, there's still a requirement there for councils to publish a councillor's home address. And the LGA said, while these measures are good, we still want to see this rather, in my word, antiquated requirement removed for privacy and security reasons.
Yeah. Well, certainly I think it raises real concerns now, given just frankly it's sad, but it's the world that we're in. In Victoria, of course, whilst with your electoral material, councillors running, you do need to put an authorisation on there. You can use, and you have to have an address, not an email address, but it can be a PO box address. And of course, it might be the authorising party might be someone other than the candidate. So yeah, not the rules are different in Victoria than in the UK, and I think they're probably for quite sound reasons as well in Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like they'd like something similar in the UK. All right, I've reached the end of my list. Do either of you have anything to add to our list of topics for this week before we wrap up?
I was just going to say, Chris and Julie, that just slightly on that security topic, just a reminder for councils that you have got the power, councils, to restrict and set terms and conditions for access to council-owned buildings like your town halls. And I'm thinking now not just about the councillors, but about council staff. And we have seen, and I have given advice to councils in Victoria, we have seen people, members of the public coming in with cameras, disrupting people, council officers carrying out their work, filming their monitor screens, etc., being obnoxious. Councils, CEOs, you have got the power to restrict access, to then call the police and have people removed as trespassers. You can do that under your local law typically, and it's not the case, despite what you might see on YouTube from the US, that it's a publicly owned facility, so I'm entitled as a member of the public to just wander in and do what I like and film. You certainly can restrict that and encourage CEOs to consider that.
Good thoughts, Tony. Julie?
No, all good, Chris. It's been a bumper week again and lots of diversity in news. So I look forward to what next week is going to bring.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you both. And Tony, thank you to the team at Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for the ongoing support for VLGA Connect and TGU, which stands for the Governance Update. And we'll be back with another edition. I think we'll be back with another edition pre-Easter. We'll see what the news is like next week. In the meantime, subscribe to us on the YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss future episodes, including if you were a registrant for the Global Executive Panel on Gender Equity, which will be coming out to registrants in the next few days. And of course, as always, the program is available as an audio podcast. In fact, the listenership of the podcast far outstrips the viewership on YouTube, which I understand. You can listen to us. You don't have to look at us. Thank you, Tony and Julie. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon.
See you, everyone.
Bye for now.